Why, peace knuqⱡi'it. In our Enseeligan language, that's simply good day, my dear friends and relatives. My traditional name is knuqⱡi'it. And it simply translates into loon. And I cherish that name like one of the most precious things in my life. When you're given a name by the elders, by the knowledge keepers, it's a major event in your life. And that happened in about 1991, and we had just come through the Oka crisis. And we traveled extensively across the country, throughout the province, a lot of blockades. We went to jail a number of times. And when it came to my name, I had no idea it was going to happen. It was like a session like this, and an entourage come through the back door, and I was called up. And it was the most emotional thing that ever happened to me. I was blindsided. And the elder said the reason we chose this name, because I traveled all over during the Oka crisis, they said that knuqⱡi'it has traveled all across Turtle Island, and his voice was heard everywhere he went, like the loon. And we were dealing with the police, we were dealing with the Canadian Armed Forces, we were dealing with government, we were dealing with rednecks, knuqⱡi'it. And the elder said, like the loon, when it goes under, you never know where it's going to come up. And they said, and that's the way knuqⱡi'it is. They never know where I'm going to pop up. So I'm popping up here. I want to share a little bit of history. I was here in this community in 1975. There was a large meeting of Indigenous peoples here from all of the interior tribes, and it was a year after we rejected funds. That was a major, major political development right across the country. And it absolutely shocked the government of Canada that they never believed for a moment we'd do something that extreme. And virtually overnight, all of our band administrations, our tribal councils, we were soon supported by the Friendship Center movement across the country. All friendship centers closed. And it was just such a powerful collective move on all our part. And the meeting that we had here was very similar to this one. The question was, where do we go from here? And we had come together under the branding of the Central Interior Tribal Council, CITC. And that was the last time I was here. I want to offer a shout out to 3 of the women that I have the greatest respect for, that I totally admire, that are amazing leaders and incredibly strong leaders from this area. Sophie Pierre, Catherine Tenise, and Cheryl Grasmere, Chief Cheryl Grasmere. I've known them 50 years. I've worked with them, and they're amazing leaders, and they've done wonders to shape policy, to change legislation and things of that nature. So the things that they were able to provide the leadership for were thought impossible at the time. And yet, here we are today. George Manuel was here during that meeting I'm describing. And he was the president of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. I'm the president at the moment. And George went on to organize the World Council on Indigenous Peoples, which laid the foundation for the work on the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And that was considered impossible. It took a couple of decades because we're talking about all the countries in the world, some of them dictatorships and so on and so forth, and yet it happened after all that time. And here in British Columbia, John Horgan was premier then. He brought forward the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, which is legislation, which is law in British Columbia. And we were in the legislature when it happened. And it was such a critical moment in the history of our people. And we all spoke, of course, and then it went to the vote. And we had some really hostile, racist BC Liberal Party members in the House at that time. And I was convinced it would never go through. And I just looked down and closed my eyes. And it went through unanimously, both sides of the House. I was waiting for one or two people in there that are so opposed to say something, and they didn't. It was just amazing. And Chief Cheryl Grasmere, she put her hand up, and she said, "Did everybody hear that?" And everybody's looking at each other, and she said, "The sky didn't fall in." So that was an amazing time. Those were amazing times. There were mass movements in the U.S., the civil rights movement, the peace movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement. And it was part of who we were as a larger society. It very much was in our blood to challenge the status quo that we knew were absolutely heading in the wrong direction. And it was the most amazing time to grow up in, to be part of that movement. I was in my early 20s, and the music of that time was all revolutionary. And so we had the people, we had the music, we had, the goals, civil rights, which there was a bill passed in Congress, the Vietnam War. Pretty much all of those struggles we prevailed, but we only prevailed because it was a mass movement. And somehow, you don't hear the music anymore. Nothing personal, but the music that's out there today. It's so violent, it's so offensive, and it's so not about bringing people together to respect each other as individuals, to care about the land, to care about the environment, to care about those values that make us special in terms of having respect and concerns for our children, for our communities, and for the wider Mother Earth. And it's been a very long, winding road. There isn't a place in this country I haven't been in terms of fighting these oil and gas projects, fighting pipelines. I've been thrown in jail a number of times. And I have people that I have known for 50 years and down all over this country. And it's amazing when you go through those kinds of battles, how close you become with one another and whatnot. And if you were to see somebody over in the corner there, you'd just go tearing over there and just slam a big hug on them and whatnot. My point of all of this is we have to get back to that. You know, somehow since those times, we've drifted apart. We're more concerned about our own circumstances and less concerned about what's happening to our land, what's happening to Mother Earth, you know, what's happening to our countries in terms of the right-wing extremism. And somehow, as the good people that you are in this room, we have to recapture the spirit. I was reading your statement there, and I would like to see living put into that. It talks about whatever it says there should be the word living. Because you know, taking the pulse of a living, because it just says taking the pulse of, and you know, that could be dead on arrival, right? So, you know, we're living in tumultuous times. We're living in perilous times. We just went through a federal election, and Carney's all happy pants about becoming a superpower, an energy superpower. He's talking about building pipelines east and west. Him and Doug Ford are completely in tandem. Doug Ford has Bill 5, which is same as Bill 14 and 15 here in British Columbia. It's basically handing the entire agenda over to industry in regard to major resource development projects. And we all know what the consequences of that are going to be. So I don't think we've ever lived in more challenging times. You know, there was a time not so long ago when the notion of these major pipeline projects was pretty much opposed by the majority of Canadian society. That's not the case today. Everybody's down at Tim Hortons talking about, can't wait for the pipelines. You know, really looking forward to that. I'm going to go out and buy myself a new truck. You know, it's very scary. I was blessed many times in my life, but there was an author that passed, her name was Lee Miracle, and she was an activist, and she wrote a book back in the 70s. It was called Bobby Lee, Indian Rebel, and it was all about the movement. And in that book was a picture. I never did read the book. I couldn't get past the picture. And I kept looking at that picture, never dreaming I would ever meet this person. And I ended up on the board of the Vancouver Indian Center. And lo and behold, I looked across the table, and there she was sitting there. And we've been together now for 48 years. We've been married for about 41 years. And it was the movement that brought us together. It was the movement that sustained our relationship, and all of our children. We had 6 adult children. We lost one to fentanyl. We have 15 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. And all of them have grown up inside the movement. All of them have been to marches and rallies and blockades and camps and things of that nature. So they fully understand what the movement is about. They understand who the enemy is. They understand why we're out there fighting for the land. This territory is so beautiful. I haven't been over here for a long time, but it's absolutely worth fighting for, to protect what we can protect collectively. But this movement is not a bystander movement. It's not a polite movement. It's you have to show up. You have to speak out, and you got to stand up, and we have to do it together. You know, what's at stake is Mother Earth, is the water. You know, we take everything for granted. I often talk to groups and I say, don't take for granted what you see out your kitchen window. And people do that. They look out and say, oh yeah, that'll be there forever. And the place we're in that now shows differently. The crazy things that are going on. The economics that are happening right now are so bloody unpredictable. We have no way of knowing how bad it's going to get. And everybody yawns and says, yeah, okay, whatever. But wait till it starts happening. So I really enjoyed the wisdom in this room. The knowledge that has been shared, the very fact that you care enough by showing up. We have to organize in a very efficient, effective way. And it takes a lot of work. There are special people in this room that are good at organizing. And we have to follow their lead. And any differences we may have, we don't have time for that. We don't have time for squabbles or whatever, whether they be ideological or, just petty little things. I don't like you. I don't like the way you look at me. I mean, come on. We're talking about our grandbabies here. We're talking about their future. I had a situation once, and we were going to Mount Currie. It was during Oka. And we all got ready. We're going to drive over at night. And my son wanted to come. The older boys were old enough. And we told him he couldn't come because we were so afraid. The SWAT team was already over there. We were so afraid he was going to get hurt. So he goes to his room, gets on his bed, and he goes absolutely comatose. And he wouldn't respond, or everybody was up in his room trying to bring him around. So we went down and had a meeting in the living room. And one of my sons looked at me and said, "It's his fight too, Dad." And now that son is up here, he's like 240 pounds. He's an environmental monitor. And he knows the fight. He knows why we need to do this. And like he's totally available. So we have to change, what we do. There was a lot of talk today about reparations. There's some places I drive by and I want to get out with a power saw and start cleaning it up and putting all this stuff in a pile and, because there's all kinds of crap in the water, right? And of course I don't have the power saw with me, but we have to have that mindset. When we see things, we got to fix it. And if we need help, we got to ask somebody for help. And there's a lot of talent out there. I am so proud of Knuqⱡi'it and the Guardian program. I think that's absolutely amazing. And we should all have Guardian programs like that. We need to get involved. We're at a point is where to from here? After listening, we just went through, as I mentioned earlier, the Government of Canada, Province of British Columbia, Ontario, passing fast-track legislation to open the gates wide for industry. And of course, everyone lit their hair on fire, quite rightfully so. But that's not enough. They went ahead and passed the bills anyways. What we need to do as an electorate is, why don't we have draft legislation to bring forward with all the lawyers we have working for us to fast-track legislation on protecting the environment, protecting the water, and all the things that we've been speaking about here for the last couple of days. I think we dropped the ball on that. It's like being as old as I am, I work with a lot of young leaders. And one bit of advice I always offer is stop chasing cars, because they just go tearing after whatever the issue is. And, you have to be strategic. You can't just make a lot of noise and have that energy not bring about the direction we need to go in. We have to stand up for the things that we talk about and agree upon in this room. We have to stand our ground when we're down at Tim Hortons and you hear some absolutely obnoxious idiot, talking about the things that we care about. We have to say, excuse me, but I disagree. You're absolutely wrong. I want Mother Earth to be here when my grandkids grow up. I don't want just a big wasteland left behind by industry. We got to be that courageous. And it's much easier if we're together. And we seem to have, I don't know what you would call it, but it's not good. And that's, we've been programmed to call down everything. No, I disagree with that. Oh, those people are, what do they know? Blah, 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 right? That's not where our minds need to be. It's what can I do? What can we do, to fix this situation? It's not good enough just to throw rocks at the opposition or whatever. And we have to support the parties that believe about people. And that sure the heck ain't the Conservatives. Rustad said, the first thing I'm going to do if I form government is I'm going to abolish DRIPA. the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. That work has been going on for decades and decades and decades, and he's just going to come along and rip it up, which would completely destroy the relationships in this province. You know, it would be absolute chaos. And that's his mindset. Like, he's not a very intelligent person, but this is our land. And by our land, I mean everybody. You know, this is where we built our homes. This is where we're raising our children and grandchildren. And it's worth fighting for. And I'm sorry to say this, but you're it. You know, it's all of us in this room that need to show up and be present. So we have natural organizers here. I see them moving around the room. And I think I'll end where I started. I started talking about Sophie, Catherine, and Cheryl. I have learned in my time that women are the absolute key to any successful movement. Women understand what happens if women pack the burden of poverty and heartbreak from opioid tragedies, not having adequate housing. And so they're the ones that are most committed to do the heavy lifting. And when I come into a room, may surprise you, I do a head count. Like, how many guys, how many women? You know, what are the women doing? You know, and it's like, so, most of you know my wife Joan is an MLA. She represents Vancouver Strathcona. And believe me, I was a very peaceful, agrarian-minded individual until she came into my life. You know, and then I found myself in jail, you know, staring across a blockade at dozens of policemen and whatnot. And Joan says, we have to do the right thing. And when she says that to me, I think, uh-oh. That means we have to go out there. So again, I love this country here. The land, the water, the mountains. Even, like, you can tell the people here are different. You know, I spend a lot of time in Vancouver, not like this. So I've really enjoyed the hospitality. I've enjoyed your company. I've enjoyed listening to you. I love that line. Something like Canada has an abundance of safe, clean drinking water until it doesn't. I just absolutely love that, because we were talking about no water. Can you imagine, you know, all the stream beds and the river beds and the lake beds being absolutely empty? I drive around this province a lot, and over the years I've seen, you know, trickles during the summer, and it's not getting any better. My favorite time of year is the spring with the freshet, and all the rivers and streams are right up. And I always pray, I wish it could be like that all year round. But I'm starting to ramble, so where's Cameron? Oh, Cameron Spooner, Gitsan. He works for the UBCIC. an amazing driver. He drove all the way here from Vancouver, and he's a very talented, well-educated individual. And we have lawyers, young ladies, and policy people like that working for us to deal with these issues. So we're family. You know, we got to accept that we're family. And you know, I'm just so happy to be doing this. Always think about my grandbabies. Always. That's the lens I look through when it's too far or it's too hard. So it's been an honor. And those meatballs were unbelievable.